Chicago? Will that be the next Silicon Valley? And medical marijuana for children, just a few of the stories that are trending now.
Chicago wins big. $320 million in federal, state, and private funds will build the Digital Manufacturing and Design Innovation Institute. President Obama and the mayor say the center will revolutionize manufacturing, bring jobs back to Chicago, and allow our city to compete with Silicon Valley and other tech giants.
This is where the next jobs are going to be, all the future jobs in this field.
Medical marijuana for kids? It's a controversial issue, but one that's gaining support, especially among parents of children with seizure disorders. Some Illinois residents are lobbying lawmakers to change the rules, permitting childhood use of the drug and adding epilepsy to the list of qualifying conditions.
Kids who have illnesses, they should be able to use medical marijuana if it will help their situation.
Congressman Danny Davis wants to give former Governor Rod Blagojevich and other federal inmates some relief. Davis is leading an effort to reduce time behind bars for prisoners serving mandatory minimum sentences. Also, inmates who are elderly or disabled.
I think any time that you lessen any inmate's time in a prison is good. I think prison as its whole purpose is a bad institution within our society.
Congressman Davis says several U.S. senators support his plan. As a writer, director, and actor, he brought us some of the funniest moments on film. Animal House, Caddyshack, Groundhog Day, and of course, Ghostbusters. Sadly, Chicago native, comedy great, and Second City alum Harold Ramis died this week. He was 69.
More on Harold Ramis and his memorable body of work in just a bit, but first, we'll introduce our panel of guests. Joining us today, Dory McWhorter, CEO of YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, author Cheryl Jefferson, and Carl D. West, CEO of MG Media and TBTNewsService.com. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Hello.
Big news this week for Chicago. The president and the mayor announced that Chicago won big federal grant to build the center, I always get this wrong, for digital manufacturing and design innovation. Mayor Emanuel called it an Olympic gold medal for Chicago. Dory, is it?
Absolutely. I think anytime you have something on this size and scale and so progressive in terms of the digital movement is very exciting. So my thing is I just hope that all citizens are able to participate in this great achievement for the city.
The president did make the announcement under a banner that read, "Opportunity for all." Carl, does everyone win here?
It's debatable. But to make that statement, an Olympic gold medal for all, I guess is playing off the fact that Chicago didn't get the Olympics a few years ago under the former administration. So I want to piggyback off that to say that this is a great victory. But once again, we'll see once all the chips have been dealt and see who gets jobs, who get constructions, and who can benefit from this over the years to come. Yes.
How about the location? They're building this on Goose Island, kind of the north side of the city. Cheryl, is that a good choice, a troubling choice? How do you see it?
That industrial corridor has a long history. So in terms of reinvigorating that part of the city and taking it beyond just the very popular sort of beer entertainment district that it is currently known as, I think is actually a very good choice. The other thing I would like to add to Dory and Carl's point is Carl Sandburg called us the city of big shoulders. And as we move forward with this wonderful digital opportunity, are we going to shoulder responsibility for making sure this facility can do some things in terms of social relevancy, of projects that would be very important? And how's that going to be determined? Because there's a big list of corporate donors, universities who are involved. So what happens to the person who wants to invent, say, a solar cooker to go out and help impoverished areas where that might be a valuable tool? How will that piece work? We don't know yet.
And that's another good point about all these corporate donors and, of course, the universities and schools that are attached to this. These people do this with an interest, right? So where are their interests going to be, where they're going to receive their interests at? Because, look, they don't do this for nothing. I mean, it's always a great gesture to be supportive of a progressive city like Chicago. But once again, there's a lot of people involved in this, and they expect to get something in return at the end of the day.
How concerned should we be about competing interests here?
Well, I mean, being concerned is always an issue when something like this comes to the table, because we live in a city that has had some issues in the past of how things have been divvied out as far as construction, jobs. And so we hope that something like this can be a stepping stone to moving in the right direction for all of Chicago and not just a small part of it.
I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive, though. I think that you have the right pieces there. So you have corporate America, you have the academic environment, you have the city, and you have the federal government at play. I think that we can still do what we need to do with that initiative and still consider what are the social benefits that we could have with something on such a large scale that really will demonstrate that Chicago as a global leader, truly be an Olympic gold global leader, and bring in all of the city. We can demonstrate that, and this is a great opportunity to do that.
Some of the organizations that are part of the consortium are actually doing their digital development overseas right now. Caterpillar is a good example. So the idea that they might bring that back to Chicago with such an attractive, really deep bench strength kind of a group working here, I think might allow for some, back movement so that we can reinvigorate the economy and the job base.
Well, two things here. First, one, I heard there's going to be maybe 100 jobs that's created from this at first. And then second of all, I think the title of saying that Chicago is going to be the new Silicon Valley, I think is a major stretch, because Chicago has a long way to go before we can reach that title that is labeled in San Francisco on the West Coast. But look, I always say possibility is a wonderful thing. So with possibilities and opportunities like this, we will see what will be the outcome of this. I mean, I'm eager to see, because I'm involved in technology in Chicago, and I'm a Chicagoan. I love Chicago, and I want to see our city progress. But once again, I want to see all of Chicago progress. And for me, that will be the determining factor for me at the end of the day with this.
As Daniel Burnham said, make no small plans, right?
Absolutely.
We'll switch gears now to medical marijuana. The Epilepsy Foundation and a growing number of parents want to change the Illinois law that just took effect and make medical marijuana available to some children who have seizure disorders. Dory, is this a good idea?
It's interesting. Whenever you talk about marijuana, or any drug, whatever that choice may be, you get some kind of reaction. And I personally feel that when you're talking about medicating kids on any level, regardless of the drug that's being used, that there needs to be a lot of consideration for that. So whether it's marijuana or other forms of drugs, I think we really need to understand what are the effects of that. I've heard some of it about the effects of marijuana on children and what that could do, but we also hear about the effects of other drugs on children that we don't seem to care as much about or haven't let that stop us. So I think that we really need to look at all the drugs that are being dispensed to children and really evaluate them.
Now, 20 states have already legalized medical marijuana. Many of those states allow use in children under certain conditions. But Cheryl, where do you draw the line?
It's about critical need meets common sense. It's also about parent-child rights. And it's a very, very complex issue. If you have a child with a terminal illness and that child is in pain that medical marijuana might be able to help mitigate, then certainly, that is an option that parents really need to have available to them, particularly if they know the child is suffering from a terminal illness. Other illnesses with other spans of time might require a different type of approach, but I think critical need, common sense, if those two things can marry with respect around the child and parental right issues, we can find a path.
Carl, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, let me express that anytime there's a situation where we can relieve suffering on children as well as adults, but in this particular case on children, it's always a good thing to look at the options there. But then of course we have to look at what happened in the 70s and the 80s when we had this term called crack babies, right? We hope that we don't create another generation of babies who become hooked on marijuana because of this drug entering their system, used to help, but on a long-term effect, it has harmed them. And we always got to think about that. Of course, they talked about removing some of the chemicals that addict people in the marijuana uses, for instance. But hopefully that is accurate and it does not do long-term damage to children who are meant to be helped from using marijuana in this case.
Now, to be clear, I think we should be clear that it's not children smoking marijuana.
Right.
They
Absolutely.
break down the compound that's in it and would give it to children. But critics say there's no medical science backing up these parents' claim that marijuana is indeed effective and that the drug has not been rigorously tested even for use in adults. Does that weigh on your mind, Carl?
Of course it does. It goes back again to creating a long-term effect that will harm babies, that will come into adulthood, and that somehow their bodies trigger this recurring action that will have them desiring this particular drug in order to feed their needs. And I just don't want to see that happen. But once again, anything that can help relieve stress and pressures and pains of young people as well as old is always something to look at.
Cheryl, you had something to say.
I'd like to know how the FDA factors into this, because, you know, the FDA is such a fascinating body with so many interesting approaches to things. And, you know, we have seen, all you need to do is turn on your television and you see ad after ad after ad, and then mysteriously you listen to that scary long list of side effects.
Well, can you imagine the
which are
caveats for
rarely
marijuana?
Right. And, you know, and then
Exactly.
suddenly those drugs, poof, they're gone. We're not seeing commercials anymore, and we read about big lawsuits. So, you know, what will be the whole regulatory aspect of this? How is the FDA involved? And where is this product going to come from? You know, and down the road, it's kind of interesting to speculate, how would it impact the drug trade, you know, going on?
I agree with that, because what I notice is that when you're talking about other drugs other than marijuana, the side effects, whether, you know, I've seen, you know, at least some of the descriptions of the side effects with the marijuana, but I don't know that that's any worse or better than some of the side effects like liver damage that I've seen with other drugs.
Or death.
Or death.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's always the kicker. Yeah.
So some of those things, I just think again that it needs to be weighed, and what's the process looks like, and if you're extracting so much of it, is it really marijuana anymore? What are you really delivering? Is it a new name? Does it
Speaking
go
of
by a new
changes
name?
with the law, Congressman Danny Davis wants to lighten the sentence of some federal inmates, including former Governor Rod Blagojevich, now serving 14 years for corruption. He says federal prisoners should get time off for things like taking classes and good behavior. Cheryl, is this a good idea?
Well, there are a lot of layers to this situation. First of all, accurate sentencing is probably a very good place to start. You know, we have a lot of issues with who is sentenced, who is convicted, what happened, right? So we should, I think, start at a baseline of, you know, accurate sentencing, accurate convictions. And then what do you do about truth in sentencing? When you have this kind of situation where you're going to be mitigating, that should always be judged on a case-by-case, very individual basis, because circumstances vary widely. In terms of truth in sentencing, if you say to yourself, well, they'll probably give me 15 years, but I bet I can get out in 5 because I'm going to turn 70 or whatever it's going to be, where does that factor in? And, you know, I think that that's something that needs to be looked at. Certainly compassion is important, and maybe we need a middle road option. If someone has become a senior citizen in prison, what exactly are they going to do when they get out of prison? Are they going to work? Are they going to collect Social Security? Like, what will happen to them? And we need to kind of look at, is a facilitation of, you know, a possibility there?
Carl, we need to rethink this?
Absolutely. I mean, I look at it as a way, and I think Congressman Davis, you know, has been a good congressman, I guess, for his district. And so he's looking at an opportunity to, of course, put some things in place that can create discussion. And I don't know how far it's going to go, really, but I always think about, when I heard about this, about Prettwinkle, Cook County Board President Prettwinkle, when she made the statement about not sentencing non-offenders, you know, drug users, for instance, you know, people who use drugs and sell small users of marijuana, to not give them prison sentencings because it, you know, it wastes time, money. And so this is probably the same thing in my respects of Congressman Davis saying, look, here's an opportunity for me to create some dialogue on something that probably will never, ever come to fruition in my mind.
Well, we're running low on time. I just wanted to give a nod to Harold Ramis. He passed this week after a great body of work. If we can quickly go around and talk about your favorite Harold Ramis movie in moments. Carl, we'll start with you.
It was always Ghostbusters. I mean, you know, who didn't love and grow up on the Ghostbusters? All 4 or 5, I think it's tons of them anyway. And I think he co-wrote that and started it, of course. And so he's a Chicagoan. Once again, I love Chicago, and great for him. I mean, it's sad for his family. It's always a sad time when someone loses a life.
Thank you. Cheryl, we'll run out of time. Your
He was a
favorite movie?
genius who understood that comedy is truth plus surprise, and he made that happen.
Dory?
Creativity, when you lose something that creative, it's always a loss, but we definitely have his work to remember him by.
And it makes us smile and laugh. Dory McWhorter,
Absolutely.
Cheryl Jefferson, Carl D. West, we appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.